start by saying thank you so much to everyone who sent me really lovely messages and texts and flowers and cards and presents. It's been really lovely. My mum passed away Sunday before last, unexpectedly. And that's always the hardest, right? When you have an unexpected death. But I did manage to get to Swansea, 6 hours drive, but I managed to get there with 5 hours to have with her. She wasn't conscious at that point, but I was with her. And I sat and I read her favourite scriptures. I read her Romans 8, Psalm 27, Psalm 18, all the go-to scriptures, you know the ones. And she hadn't moved, and she just lifted her hand and put it on the side of my face. By the way, when I put it in my notes, it spell checked it to Emu, so I changed it to Emmy. I'm glad, Emmy, not Emu, that you said God speaking to you this morning about how faithful He is, because that's what I'm going to talk about. It's how faithful God is, and we've sung a lot about it this morning, and that's partly because I said to Kinnear, I was talking about faithfulness, so I don't know whether that influenced the song choices. But God is absolutely faithful to us. Absolutely faithful to us. And as we respond to Him in faithfulness, so it helps us to become more faithful to people that are around us. People in our families, in our homes, in our communities and workplaces. We reflect that faithfulness that we have towards God in response to how faithful He is to us. Because faithfulness is important to God, and that's why there are hundreds and hundreds of Bible verses about God's faithfulness. You can go and Google them, and there's hundreds. Tell me Bible verses about faithfulness to God, right? Google's awesome at doing things like that. It's how we are supposed to relate to each other, and with this faithfulness in mind. Therefore, God's kind of designed it into our DNA. He's designed it into our characteristics and our personalities to want to be faithful and to enjoy faithfulness when we see it. So we're not supposed to be... Has it cut back? There you go. Can you still hear me? There we are. I'm not cracking anymore. Sorry. We're not supposed to relate to each other in a very transactional way, right? Now, if I want to go and buy beans for Kinnear, and she loves it almost as much as Emmy loves beans, and I go to Tesco's, I can buy beans, right, using a machine, right? And it's a transaction. We're not supposed to transact with each other as if we're all machines, right? That would be a miserable way in which we were to operate with each other, that everything was done on a transactional or value basis or an exchange of something. It's not supposed to be like that. You know, faithfulness is supposed to be this building block in all of our relationships and in our communities that gives us this sense of stability, this sense of consistency that we know we can move forward on. And when we relate well to each other, we can have confidence in each other that we are going to do the things that we say we're going to do. That if we've committed to something, we'll do it. That if we've got a responsibility, we'll follow through on it. It's better when everybody knows we can trust each other in that way. It makes for a much smoother life. It makes for a solid basis on which to move forward on. Because we know that the opposite of unfaithfulness is carnage. It brings about calamity in almost every circumstance when it rears its head. And we've all experienced this to some extent. We've relied on somebody to do something that they've said and they haven't done it. And it's just caused an awful lot of upset and a lot of problem, or they've made a promise and they don't follow through on it. We've all got people in our families and our friendship groups and even people in work who you're not quite sure if you can trust them or not. And it makes for like shaking sands for you to walk on. You're never quite certain. You can't approach them with any sort of sense of certainty that they'll follow through on what they've said. That's not a great way in which we shall relate, and it's a hard way to live. And sometimes, to be fair, we've done that to other people. So it's not all about other people doing that to us, right? We've often done that vice versa. So what happens is this: in order to convince people that we will do something, we start to swear oaths to people. And people start to swear oaths to us, and we attach conditions to it. And this is where you hear the language of, oh, I swear on my mother's life. Or I swear on my kid's life. And you've heard it, and it makes me cringe when I hear it, right? But the sense of it is to try and attach the commitment of what you're going to do to something that you deem to be important in order to convince somebody, yeah, I will do it. or you look for somebody to say that to you in order that somehow we can give you some sense of security that things will happen as you planned. It's not a great way to behave. It's not a great way in 2020 for us to build relationships around us. This constant bargaining and swearing of oaths simply because we can't trust people and we're uncertain that they'll do what they say. So it's not a difficult job for me to convince you this morning that faithfulness is a good thing. Because we see what happens with unfaithfulness. In fact, Jesus sees faithfulness as so important that in Matthew, he puts faithfulness alongside justice and mercy in relation to important matters of the law. That's how important he sees it. He compares it to justice, which we're all about justice, mercy, which some of us are less over, but justice and mercy are really important things, and Jesus puts faithfulness right up there alongside it. And the reason he does that is because it's important to God. And just in the same way that we don't transact with people as if people are machines, so we don't transact with God like God is a machine. In our heads, sometimes we can think that God is this aloof, all-knowing, all-seeing superpower who just needs to be fed a couple of coins on a Sunday or do enough good things just to keep him happy, keep evil things at bay, just to make sure that nothing tragic happens in our life. And we get into this transactional mode with God. If we're just doing enough on a daily basis, God will be all right with that. That's not a way in which God wants to relate to us. God made us for a relationship. He made us so that we would be in this friendship with him, this relationship with him, that isn't about if you do this, I do that, with strings attached to it. It isn't about that. It's about this loving relationship that a father's got with his children. That's God's absolute desire for every one of us. Nobody excluded. Doesn't matter what you've done, God's heart towards you is still for relationship. And in the same way as faithfulness is essential in natural relationships, so faithfulness is essential in our relationship with God. I know God is faithful. I know that in my life. And I can pretty much bet, if I handed the microphone to most of you here, you would be able to tell me why you think God's faithful to you. You would be able to demonstrate the faithfulness of God. I was telling the Bible study on Friday that it's been a heavy couple of weeks, and you know that for reasons I've just said, but it's also been a heavy couple of weeks in work. And it's been really, really tough. And that's just meant that I've had less time to read my Bible. Now, I'm not advocating that you can get through a week without reading your Bible, right? But God is still so faithful to me that I came out that week winning. When actually on Friday I was thinking this is going to be such a tough day, it's going to be a really hard day at work. And at the end of the day I was bouncing into Bible study because he's like, I'm winning. Why? Because God is faithful. He didn't look at me and say, you haven't read your Bible enough this week, Dawn. You've only spent 2 minutes in prayer. Therefore you're on your own today, love. God don't work like that. We treat each other like that, right? But God doesn't work like that. God is absolutely faithful to us. And he's faithful to everything that is in his word and all of his promises. Everything he said in his word, he is faithful to it. We've mentioned one already. He says you will be comforted if you mourn. What about the one in Isaiah 40:29 where he says he gives strength to the weary? Anybody weary here? God's promises he'll strengthen you. He says he'll increase the power of those who are weak. Brilliant, that's a promise. God's faithful to that promise. The one that Angie mentioned, where it says, don't let your heart be troubled, believe in God. There's nothing for us to be anxious about. There's another one in Isaiah where it says that the Lord will renew our strength so that we'll soar on wings like eagles, run and not grow weary. Anybody like the thought of 2020 and not getting tired? Not just physically tired, but not emotionally tired. Not just overcome by life, that you just feel like a week in bed wouldn't sort it out. That tiredness in your soul. And Jesus says, there's a promise in the Bible that God says, I will renew your strength. So you don't need to feel that kind of tiredness on the inside. What about one in Isaiah 43 where it says, when you go through deep waters, they will not overwhelm you. When you go through fires and difficult situations, it won't burn you. What about Jeremiah 29:11? Promise. You'll know already. Promise of God, who says, I know the plans I've got for you. and their plans to prosper you. Amen to that promise. What about in Matthew 6 where Jesus says, why are you worrying about what you're going to eat and what you're going to drink and what you're going to wear? He says, God knows what you need. Seek him first. And he's nodding, that wasn't mentioned. That was gone in today, isn't it? But we worry about things like this. What am I going to wear? What am I going to eat? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And God said, just put God first, all that's going to get sorted. God knows what you need. Stop worrying about the trivial things in life. What about in John where he says, I leave you my peace. So your hearts don't need to be in trouble. What about when it says that when we take our delight in the Lord, he'll give you the desires of your heart? Yeah. What about when it says the Lord is near to everybody who calls on him? You know, Emmy's encouraged us several times in the service to call on God in our hearts. Do you know what that means? You just go, Jesus. That's it. And every tear that runs down your face and every sigh that comes out of your mouth is interpreted. God knows exactly what that means. Even if you can't put words around it. And the promise of God's word is, the moment you call on him, he's near to you. No exceptions. He's near to you in that moment. The Bible is absolutely full of God's promises. Peter calls them very great and precious. They absolutely are. So let me ask you this. If we believe that God is faithful, as we've sung many times this morning, and we know that he's absolutely faithful to his promises, why are we so afraid in life? Why do we still get anxious? Why do we still worry? Why are we still so concerned? Is it because the reality of our circumstances is more real than God is to us? Because when we know God to be as real as our circumstances, we know we can rely on all of his promises, and we know that we can lean on him. The trouble is that we tend to still approach God with this uncertainty of whether he'll do what he said he'll do. Just like we approach other people with uncertainty. We can approach God in that same way, as if God should be the one that we mistrust. As if God would be the one that wouldn't do as he says. But it's our sinful nature inside us that makes us prone to doubting God's promises when we should know better. We behave as if God's word can't be trusted. So I'm going to read you a couple of things from Hebrews. And this is Hebrews 6 from verse 13. And in my Bible, this is entitled The Certainty of God's Promises. Because this is a good reminder for us this morning that we can actually believe God. We can actually take the Bible at his word. And so let me read to you from verse 13. When God made his promise to Abraham, since there was no one greater for him to swear by, he swore by himself. Don't you like that? Now, God doesn't need to swear to anybody. He don't need to give an oath, right? But he knows what we like. He knows what we like, and he knows we like a little bit of, ooh, how do we make that certain? So God, who hasn't got anything else to attach importance to other than himself, swears by himself, right? So he's sworn this by himself. So when God's sworn something by himself, you know he's good for it. If he's sworn it by me, you know you're not good for it, right? But he's sworn it by himself. So he says, he swore it by himself, saying, I will surely bless you and give you many descendants. And so after waiting patiently, Abraham received what was promised. Now men swear by someone greater than themselves, and the oath confirms what is said and puts an end to the argument. Because God wanted to make the unchanging nature of his purpose very clear to the heirs, which are us and what's promised, he confirmed it with an oath. God did this so that by two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie, we who have fled to take hold of the hope offered to us may be greatly encouraged. We have this hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure. It enters the inner sanctuary behind the curtain. I love this reminder of God's promises. He swears by himself that he is true to his word, and it tells us God cannot lie. In fact, there's a verse in Numbers, and it says God's not a man that he should lie, not a man that he should change his mind. Does he speak and then not act? Does he promise and then not fulfill? That's another verse that's in the Bible that reminds us that God cannot lie. So when he's put it in his word, it's not possible for him to lie about it. And so he swears it by himself to say, it is impossible for me to lie in these things. Therefore, every promise that was given to Abraham came true, and the same likewise for us today. Every promise in the Bible we must be able to lean on. And it says this is supposed to encourage us. In fact, it says greatly encourage us. I'm encouraged with a reminder this morning that any verse that I dive into in the Bible that has a promise of God in it, I can take it to the bank. I can absolutely rely on it. In fact, it goes on to say about how this is an anchor for us. Now, we know what an anchor does in a ship. When a ship drops down an anchor, it holds it in a storm. So it doesn't matter what the storm is doing, how big the waves are, this anchor is holding onto this boat so that the boat itself is secure. That's what happens. Well, and as much as an anchor for a boat goes down into the depths of the sea, the anchor that we've got for our soul goes up into heaven, straight into God's presence. In the most holy place of heaven, that's where our souls are anchored. And we pull on that anchor when we believe the promises of God's word. There is no need for us to be tossed around by the waves of life, to be uncertain, to be unsure before God that he is true to his word. And when we believe him, we feel that anchor. We know it, I know it. We've had stuff happen, and every family's had stuff happen, where you just feel like the waves that are coming against you are insurmountable. How am I going to get on with this? But you just know that deep on the inside, something's got a grip on you. That's what it is for your soul to be anchored in God, to know that he's not lying, that his promises are true, and he's got a good grip on you. So completely trustworthy. Verse 18, in terms of what I've just read, says, we're to flee to him and take hold of the hope that's been offered. It says that we profess this hope. Every promise that I've mentioned already was in one of the songs that we've sung today. Every one of them. So we've already professed it. We've already sung it. Now we've got to take hold of it. Now we've got to hold on to what's been offered to us. You see, something can be offered to you in a nice box, and you go, it's awesome, lovely, I like what's inside, and you never take it out of the box. You never use it, right? We have to take hold of what's been offered. We have to take a hold of these promises and receive them. He is not a liar. He doesn't change. He's not sometime-ish with you. He's not going to be a John back again. We dealt with him last week. Sometime-ish with you. He's not like that, John, is he? He's not, right? He's not going to be a, oh, brother again, he's back here again. He's not one day I like you, one day I don't. We've got friends like that. We know, right? There's people in our world. You see them on Facebook, they're all over you 1 minute, don't see them the next, right? This is not God. God's not sometime-ish with you. He's always for you. It says he doesn't change. Yeah. The Bible says in Hebrews, Jesus is the same yesterday, today, forever. And as faithful as he was in every one of these scriptures in the Old Testament, he's as faithful in our generation, and he will continue to be in future generations, because he does not change. Not at any time has anybody ever been able to say to God, you did run over on me there, God. You conned me. You pulled the wool over my eyes. Because even though life happens, God's promise is that good will come out of it. We can't control circumstances. We can't control people's behavior. We can't control choices that people make. But what God says in the Bible is, I will make all of that work out for good. Awesome. Isn't it good that God will use the best of life and the worst of life, and good will come out of it? Might not see it straight away, but good will come out of it. You know, God says that he will be faithful to his word even when everything around us looks really grim. But some of the nicest verses in the Bible about faithfulness are written by Jeremiah in a book called Lamentations. It's a miserable book to read, to be fair, because they're all sad songs. 5 really sad songs, all written by Jeremiah after Jerusalem gets destroyed, because they've got themselves into a right pickle. All their own behaviour has put them into a place in a terrible situation that they found themselves in. It's all of their own making. And people are mourning, they're crying, people are dying everywhere. It's just terrible. People are coming in, raiding their city, they get carried off to other countries. It's an awful situation for people to find themselves in. And the whole of Lamentations are sad songs that's written about this. And the one in the middle, Lamentations chapter 3, that Jeremiah writes, he's in the middle of singing this mournful dirge of a song that's really talking about how grim everything is. And right in the middle of this song, he says this in the words, because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, For his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. I will say to myself, the Lord is my portion, therefore I will wait for him. The Lord is good to those who hope in him, to the one who seeks him. It is good to wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. God's mercies to us are new every morning because his faithfulness is great. Isn't that good? You don't run out of mercy for you. You don't run out of grace for you. I need to buy the truckload every day. Wheel it up the driveway and dump it, right? Am I going to say tomorrow, I don't think I can go and ask God for mercy because I've had a bit too much of it today? No. God's mercy never fails. It's new every morning. Why? Because, as Jeremiah says, in the midst of all this grimness of what's going on, great is your faithfulness, O God. We should know this truly, tangibly for ourselves, to say, I know that my God is faithful to me. I'm going to read a bit more from Hebrews 10. I'm going to finish with this. Hebrews 10, 19. It starts by saying what's been spoken already several times, that we have confidence to enter into God's presence, not because we're cocky, not because we're so assured of ourselves, but because of what Jesus has done. Because Jesus has dealt with the penalty of our sin. Everything ever that we've ever done wrong, right, it's all dealt with. It's all forgiven. I don't know if you ever knew that. It's all forgiven. Anything you're going to do wrong tomorrow, it's dealt with already. We used to receive that forgiveness. But because it's already dealt with, that means we can be confident in coming before God, right? So it says this from verse 22. How many verses shall I read? I'll read a few. From verse 22 it says, let us draw near to God with sincerity in heart, in full assurance of faith. Now does that sound like wishy-washy? Coming confidently, fully assured. Doesn't sound like, oh, I need to be a bit uncertain about the way I approach God. Will